My name is Greg once again, and our topic for today is conscious association. And some of you are looking up here and going, what a pretty picture with all the nice colors. And I wanted to bring this into our talk today because I wanted to explain a little bit about where the idea of conscious association came from. And so this is what we call the Sunburst Mandala. And this is one of the iterations of this mandala. The original mandala, to take us back many years, Norman Paulson, Sunburst founder, was in deep meditation and was carried away in his astral body and found himself standing in front of the temple of, or the pyramid of Khephren in Egypt. And I believe, being a stonemason and a bricklayer and all those things, he started looking at the stones on the temple and how they were constructed, and then suddenly found himself inside the temple in a dark room. And there was an air or light shaft, and as the sun began to align with that air shaft, it lit up a large rectangular stone in the middle of the room. And on that stone, he saw this symbol. Norm is not the only one that's seen this symbol. Many people have seen this symbol. James Churchward, who was a British writer, engineer, and spent time working in India, Sri Lanka, and some of the Eastern countries, had befriended an Indian priest. And that Indian priest, finally, when he trusted Mr. Churchward, he showed them the fragments of some tablets that had been preserved for centuries. And on them were writings that were indecipherable by most people, and symbols. This symbol was among them. The only difference was the original symbol, instead of having 8 horizontal bars in it, had 8 vertical bars in it. And so we've changed it to make it easier to understand. That same symbol was found there, but in Churchward's explorations, he found that it existed in India, that it existed in Egypt, that it was found in the archaeological records of the Babylonians, the Assyrians. The most pure form of it was found in the Yucatan among the Mayan people. And there was a form of this among the Indians of the southwestern United States. So this symbol is not a stranger to Churchward. He saw this symbol many times after seeing these fragments. In the writings, he asked the Indian priest if there was anyone who could translate this language. And he said, there's 3 people in India who still can speak and read this language. So with their help, he was able to find out what this meant. So in simple terms, what Churchward found was this center light section represented deity or spirit. And that around that were 12 segments or scallops. And those scallops represented various virtues that we must attempt to perfect to move towards our Creator. These 8 bars down below were the path of, to use a Buddhist term, right action, for us to actually move up and into this area here. So we call that the Eightfold Path. One of those points on the Eightfold Path, there's lots of different ones, but well, there's actually 8 of them. One of them is conscious association. Now, when Brother Norm first talked to his early followers about this symbol, a few of them got together, some of the early pioneers of Sunburst. And I interviewed Rick Yule a couple of years ago about this process. He was one of them. John Slater was another, and there were a few others and they've escaped me at this point in time. But those brothers sat down and basically, for practical purposes, labeled what the 12 virtues were and how they were connected to each astrological sign, and this Eightfold Path and the steps of behavior or action that we need to take to perfect ourselves. So conscious association is about the people we keep company with. But I don't want to make this just about people. I want you to consider something for a moment. It's also how we treat animals. It's also how we treat plants. It's how we treat the soil. It's what we associate with in terms of the media. Who are we associating with on radio and television and social media and books and movies? All of this is considered conscious association because our associations, don't want to give away what I'm going to talk about, but they either raise us up or drag us down. So, as young children, our parents were our filters. They chose our friends. So if they didn't like a friend we had, we didn't see that friend anymore. But then we finally got old enough that we could choose our own friends. And sometimes that was great. I just know in my case, I chose some friends that I probably shouldn't have chosen as friends. And I remember one time sitting down with my parents, which was very rare, having two of them reprimand me at the same time. And they asked me, why did you do what you did? It's not important what I did, but why did you do it? I said, well, all the other guys were doing it. You've heard that before? My mother's answer to that was, you need to find new friends. Which today sounds very wise, but when I was a kid, it was like, you want me to dump my friends? No, I can't do that. My dad had this sage wisdom. He said, if all your friends were like lemmings running off a cliff, would you run and join them? And I've thought about that many times in my life. Am I thinking for myself, or am I going along with the peer pressure of friends that I shouldn't be associating with? And so that turned out to be a very good philosophical thought for me to keep in my mind as I was growing up. I want to share with you a story that comes from India. I can't attribute it to any author, but a father wanted to train his son on how to choose good friends and how to avoid having friends that were poor friends or friends that were bad friends. And I don't want to label people, but by bad friends, I mean people that would draw him away from good behavior. And so he told his son, I want you to go out and I want you to bring me a branch of sandalwood from the sandalwood tree outside the house. And then I want you to bring me a piece of coal, which they used in their stove in the kitchen. And the son came back after he'd gathered these things, and he had them clenched in his hands. And the father told him, go ahead and drop those things in front of him. And he said, look at your hands. And he looked at his hands. The hand that held the sandalwood had nothing on it. But the hand that held the charcoal or the coal was grimy and full of soot. And the boy saw that. He started to wipe it off, and he realized it didn't come off. And he said, son, this is the lesson I want to teach you. When you have friends that draw you away from the path that you know is right, even when they're gone, it leaves a stain on your soul. Now take your other hand that held the sandalwood. There's no stain there. Put it up to your nose and smell it. And the boy smelled the sweet aroma of sandalwood. He says that's what it's like when you have good friends. That you learn good things from them. They teach you good things. And when they're gone, that sweet fragrance is still in your soul. I liked that story because it kind of helped us to have a gauge for, I mean, if we have a bad friend, we're not going to have a sooty hand, but it tells us that our good friends leave a sweet aroma on our soul. And that is uplifting, whereas the soot on the hand is a downward ride. So Paramahansa Yogananda, who was the last guru in our spiritual lineage, echoed this very same point. He wrote, "The company you keep is important. If you leave your coat in a room where people are smoking, pretty soon it's going to smell like smoke. If you leave it outside in the garden, later on when you bring it indoors, it will carry with it the fragrance of fresh air and flowers. Such is the case with the mind. Your garment of thoughts absorbs the vibrations of those who you mix with. If you mingle with pessimists, in time you will become a pessimist. If you mingle with cheerful, happy people, you yourself will develop a cheerful, happy nature." Here's the strong one. Environment is stronger than willpower. To mix with worldly people without absorbing at least some of their worldliness requires great spiritual strength. It doesn't mean that our willpower is subject to our environment all the time. It just means that if we look at, if we are attracted to, if we move towards the charcoal, that our environment has the opportunity to now overwhelm whatever willpower we have, particularly those that are new on the path. Those that are new on the spiritual path often get tested. And if they don't have the protection and the development of their willpower, then it can draw them away from the path. A study that I ran across a few years ago, and I've used it in several cases on podcasts before. It's called the Marshmallow Study. Anyone ever heard of it? Okay, good. It was done at Stanford University a number of years ago. And just to explain the original experiment without going into a whole lot of detail, they chose a group of 3 to 5 year olds that were in preschools run by Stanford University for the employees. And they put them in a room, they sat them in a table, and on top of a box, they placed a marshmallow. And they told the child, if they could hold out from eating that marshmallow for 5 minutes, that they'd get a special reward or another marshmallow. What was interesting about the experiment was no one succeeded in making it 5 minutes. So we're talking about 3 to 5 year olds. I'm sure some of us would do better than that. But none of them, they all failed the test. However, an observation was made that I think fits into this whole idea, and that was there were a group of children who stared at the marshmallow. They even moved closer to look at the details of the white skin around the chewy part. They were trying to sniff it. They just stared at it. They were the ones that broke early and ate the marshmallow. The others who avoided that particular environment, they lasted longer. And the things that they did were some of them closed their eyes, some of them turned their head away from the marshmallow completely, and some of them even started singing songs to kind of fill up the time so they're not thinking about the marshmallow. There's a lesson in here for us that the environment that we're in, like today, is the same for each of us. But when we get ourselves in an environment that may not be as healthy, if we stare at the marshmallow, if we keep focused on the things that are not divine, if I can use that word, then what happens is we're going to succumb, and the environment's going to overcome our willpower. Yogananda said something interesting, and I found this a while back, and I thought, someday I want to use this in a talk. But he said there were dangers of thinking that you're strong enough to mix with people in a poor environment. I know that one of the things Yogananda used to do when Brother Norm drove him around was he would go to the areas of Los Angeles where there were a lot of bars. And that's an area where the environment is not really the best. And he would walk by the bars, and Brother Norm said, I believe what he was doing was sharing his power, his magnetism with the people that were in there, with the hopes that it might have some positive effect in their lives later on. But one of the things that Yogananda said, that we have to be dangerous, we have to be careful about moving in this dangerous direction, moving into dangerous environments, because we don't know what our past karmas are. We don't know who we were and what we did in previous lives. And all it takes is the smallest little step into that environment, and it could change us forever. He said this, at the right time and in the right environment, all good and bad actions of the past come to fruition. This goes along with the idea that be careful what you desire in this life, because it's going to come to fruition, either in this life or the next. And so I guess the watchword would be watch your desires. All good and bad actions of the past come to fruition, just as seeds sprout under the right conditions. This explains why it is important always to mix with good company. You don't know what kind of seeds, whether of disease or negative happenings, are dormant within you. Suppose you have the consciousness from the past seeds of craving for a drink. You have never drunk in your life, but one day you drink at a party, and suddenly you're caught up in the desire for liquor, and eventually you become addicted to it again. This was his example. So I'd like to prepare us, because I have some thoughts after our meditation that I want to share. I'd like to prepare us now to go into meditation. And if you're sitting, which most of us are, some are leaning, but if you're sitting, sit up in your chair. Try to move your back away from the back of the chair so your spine is straight. Get your head level, your feet firmly on the floor. Close your eyes and imagine that before your eyes you have a movie screen, and the movie's about ready to start. And one of the things you can do as you focus on this movie screen is begin to think about that light appearing. And I promise you that if you keep doing this day after day after day, you will eventually get to the point where you see the light. I want you to take a deep breath in. So when you take a breath in, breathe in through your nostrils. Hold it. And then breathe out through your nostrils. And then hold it. Welcome back from meditation. I have a couple more thoughts that I'd like to share about this idea of conscious association. Brother Norm had thoughts about this in his book, Sacred Science. And he knew about conscious association. He worked for many years in construction, and those of you that have ever been involved in construction know that construction crews can be kind of rough around the edges. And he would often at lunch, instead of joining all the others with their stories, and he would go off by himself and have his lunch by himself and do something that was totally unusual for somebody who had worked and so hard physically and sweat so much during the day. He started doing push-ups. So he knew the power of removing yourself from an environment that would pull you downward. But he said this: spiritual athletes traveling on the rainbow path homeward should choose the right environments in which to live and work. The adept should not choose the company of people who express virtue's opposites. If not at first, the environment of this energy will eventually lead the adept astray and away from the goal of containing the pure self, divine illumination. This applies to both working and living environments. And here's the caution: don't make the mistake of thinking you are spiritually strong enough to change others after walking the path and meditating for a little while. So as I've meditated on this subject over the last few weeks, a few thoughts have come to me on how we can better live this part of the path, this conscious association. And I broke it down into 5 parts. And the first rule of better conscious association would be to review your friends. And that doesn't mean going to look at your Facebook friends, because you might have 1,500 of them, but how many of them do you really know? How many of them do you spend any time with? How many of have you ever met? So I'm talking about the people you spend your day with. Review them. If they're people that you feel that are dragging you down or away from the path, maybe they're people that you need to start working at moving away from, little by little. But that's the question you want to ask yourself. Are these people making me a better person, or are these people making me downward? The second would be to associate with like-minded people. That's the whole purpose of a spiritual community like this, is that we offer a place for residents and visitors where they can come to a place where there is much spiritual power. You should know that this land with this ranch is on was once the site of very sacred Chumash ceremonies. It's always been sacred land. There have been many visions that have been seen on this land. The power here is very strong. And why is it so strong? Because we have a nucleus of people coming from communities around us and from far away, and people who live here that are trying to live the path, that are trying to practice virtue, and that are trying to meditate at least 2 times a day. And what that's creating, and what it has created, is a huge whirlwind, if you want to call it that, of life force right over this property. We often hear when people come here for the first time, I went through the front gate and everything felt different. That was my experience 12 years ago when I stepped onto this property. Excuse me. I didn't want to leave. I knew when I met the people that were like the people I wanted to be like, that this was my home. This is where I needed to be. The third step would be, before I get to the third step, if those that are listening to this remotely or if you've come from a far distance to visit us today, know that we'll help you. If you can't make it here every Sunday, we'll help you start a prayer group or a meditation group in your area. And that way you can gather and collect true friends that have the same wisdom. And all you have to do in that case is call our office, and we'll make sure that you have whatever you need to start a prayer circle in your community or a meditation circle. Number 3 in this is insulate yourself. So we can't always choose our work situations, and we definitely can't choose our relatives. I mean, our relatives, that's already been laid out since we were born. And so it's hard to insulate ourselves from the negative things that may occur in those places. But I will tell you that meditation is one of the strongest ways to create a protective bubble around our whole being. And I like to think of it like this. So this may be a really bad metaphor, but I'm going to use it anyway. As we draw in greater and greater amounts of life force or life energy or light, if you will, our astral body becomes brighter and brighter and brighter. Just like running a current through a copper wire creates a magnetic field, that energy in our astral body creates greater and greater magnetism. And as you meditate and continue to meditate, people will be drawn towards you. They want to know what it is that you have. They want to be like you. That's a good thing. But let me tell you, this is a true story, so I can tell you this. It happened to me. So years ago, I realized that I needed a big television. And so I got the largest television available at the time, and it was one of those rear projection TVs. And it was awesome. But the surround sound system I didn't have, so I just used my regular audio system that I had. And for those of you that are audiophiles, I had these huge 4-foot Kindle speakers that if I turned my volume all the way up on my amplifier, that I could speak to people in Egypt. So they were right next to my television on each side. So I had my television delivered, and they hooked it up, and they couldn't get the picture to work. It was just like all distorted and pulling one way and then pulling the other way. And it's like, oh, this is frustrating. So they said, I think we have a bad TV. We'll get you another one. So the next time they came in with a television, they set it up. It was a different person. And the same thing happened. And he looked around the room and he said, I know what the problem is. It's your speakers. Your speakers have magnets in them. And they're very, very powerful. In fact, the more powerful a speaker, the more powerful a magnet. He said, just move them away from the television. And so I took one, he took another. We moved them about 3 feet away from the television. The picture was perfect. Our magnetism is greater. If our magnetism is greater than those who would draw us away from the path, we're going to fall. But if we can keep our magnetism high, even a strong negative magnetism may not have any impact on us. The fourth thing would be ask for help. So just before Brother Norm passed away, there was some uncertainty among his followers here about how Sunburst would continue from that point on. And Norm told the people, I'm not going anywhere. He's here. He may be here in this room with us right now. Yogananda said the same thing. He said, for all those who think me near, I will be near. And I'll tell you, I prayed really hard before I started here that he would be near during this hour that I spent with you. ask for help. You can ask our line of gurus. You can ask our teachers. You can ask Spirit for help. Insulate me from what I'm dealing with at work. Insulate me from my relatives who are giving me damaging grief. And the fifth thing would be to become a channel. Ask Spirit to be a channel for good energy. And you will. That energy that you've developed through your meditation, through living the path, and through living the virtues is going to light up the people that are around you. It's going to attract them to you. Yogananda told us, view every person you meet as your friend. And if we do that, and if we give some of that light to each of the people that we're in contact with, if we all did that, we're raising the consciousness of the entire community. And as communities rise up, then we raise the entire consciousness of the country and then of the world. I want to leave you with one final thought, and that is the company we keep, the environment that we're in, can either inspire us or defile us. It can either energize us or it can drain us. But it's your choice. Please join me in a prayer. Almighty Spirit, Father and Mother, friend and companion, we thank you to live in this wonderful time. As the consciousness of this planet is beginning to rise. Bless us that we can have discernment about our friends and the company we keep. And that we have the strength to hold on to the path. We love you. Amen.
All the time, I know it's just you into my life. Got to get you into my life.